DevilNeverCry.
What is up, everybody? It is me, DevilNeverCry, and in this video, we'll be talking about Evil West. First of all, a big thank you to the devs and publisher of Evil West for providing me with a key, and with that, let's get on to what exactly this game is. As the name of the game alludes to, it takes place at the turn of the 19th century in an alternate version of the Wild West. You can expect to see gunslingers, saloons, and the expansive American frontier, but bandits have been traded in altogether for blood-sucking vampires and monsters you can only dream of in nightmares. The game puts you in the shoes of Jesse Rentier, a brash, somewhat seasoned vampire hunter who's a part of the Rentier Institute, a vampire hunting guild dedicated to eradicating the supernatural throughout the US. At the helm of the institute, of course, is Jesse's father, William Rentier, hence the name. And it is the straightforward narrative of good versus evil that serves as the backdrop for Evil West and what drives you through the game's 16 missions to tackle evil and essentially save the world. I made sure to mention that this is a third-person action game and not strictly a third-person shooter, though shooting elements do come into play, as there is a big focus on melee combat in this game. Jesse wields a gauntlet that plays a key part in the story, but is also fairly pivotal to the gameplay. Having effectively harnessed the ability to control and wield lightning via this gauntlet, Jesse will spend a lot of time in this game stoving enemies' faces in with swift punches, and it works rather well. The game has a very responsive dodge mechanic that allows you to effectively cancel out of a lot of your melee attacks, allowing you to weave a dance of destruction and mayhem amongst all these vampires. Once your enemy's health reaches a certain low threshold, you'll be able to hit them with a melee takedown, which throws Jesse into an invincible animation as he grips and rips his enemies apart. Once the takedown animation is over and done with, and depending on what upgrades you have selected, you'll either be rewarded with health or some form of electrical charge for your gauntlet, with the game essentially incentivizing you to not just sit back and snipe enemies from afar, but to really get stuck in. That isn't to say, however, that you can simply solve all of your issues with your fists. As you get deeper into the game's missions, it'll start to throw more and more complex enemy encounters at you that will require you to sit and think about what it is you're doing. You'll have to think about which enemies or mini-bosses you want to take out as a priority, what weapons you have at your disposal to do so, whether or not you want to try and parry enemies and take that risk, or whether you want to just simply use some of your gauntlet's electrical charge to stun enemies, as well as other ancillary combat mechanics like weak points and environmental kills. That may sound like a lot to think about initially, but thankfully the game does a good job of gradually introducing these mechanics. You'll start out with a fairly limited tool set, having access to environmental kills and weak points from the get-go, but you'll typically have a new weapon introduced in each chapter. And it's thanks to this that helped my playthrough of Evil West feel fresh right to the very end, knowing that just around the corner in the next chapter, I'd have a new weapon to toy around with. I've talked at length about the combat, so let's go ahead and talk about the moment-to-moment gameplay for a second. Typically when playing, you'll be doing one of three things, the first of which is exploring. Going into a mission, you'll typically have an overarching goal, but you won't necessarily know the specifics of it until you're there doing it. The levels themselves are somewhat expansive, though they are rather linear in design. There'll be times where you'll be able to tread off the beaten path, and which you'll be rewarded with things like bucks, the game's currency, which is used for upgrades, which we'll get onto in a second, letters, which provide further context to the narrative of the mission or the world of Evil West, and treasure chests, which unlock perks in the upgrade tree. It can be quite easy to be tunnel visioned onto your objective, but it's definitely worth stopping to have a look around at times. Another part of the gameplay loop is figuring out the solution to environmental puzzles. At times you'll have your progress blocked until you find a specific button you need to hit, a flip you need to switch, or something in the environment you need to shoot to allow you to progress onwards. Though these puzzles aren't necessarily huge brain teasers and they won't leave you racking your brains for hours, they definitely help break up the flow of the game a little and stop you from getting combat fatigue. And of course the last major part of the gameplay loop is combat itself, where you'll walk into a combat encounter and you won't be able to leave until the last enemy has been laid to rest. Ultimately, I think Flying Wild Hog did a good job of blending all of these three elements quite well when it comes to pacing. There weren't times where I wished I had more enemies to fight or places to explore. It's worth noting that each of the 16 levels had their own distinct visual style and aesthetic to them. I think the developers did a really good job of keeping things fresh and stopping the levels from blending together and feeling quite samey, if that makes sense. Harkening back to what I said about the game's currency, it's worth talking about the game's upgrade system, which is split into two specific trees. The first of which is the perk tree, or the perk system, wherein you gain a perk every time you level up in Evil West, which you gain levels of course by simply defeating enemies and enemy encounters. Every time you level up, you'll gain 1 perk point. This point can then be attributed to a specific perk. You unlock new perks either by leveling up or by finding hidden chests somewhere in the environment of a level. Almost all of the perks revolve around Jesse himself or his gauntlet and melee combat. And then we have the upgrade tree, which is entirely different from the perk system that I just mentioned and revolves solely around upgrading Jesse's weapons. The upgrade system uses the Bucks currency, which can be found throughout the environment, and Jesse also gains a set amount of Bucks every time he levels up. And just like the perk tree, Jesse will unlock a new upgrade to purchase whenever he levels up or finds a special chest somewhere in the environment. All in all, the upgrade systems allow you to mold Jesse into the vampire hunter that you want him to be. It actually incentivizes you to mess around with the systems and tweak Jesse just to how you like him, as you'll often be able to respec all of your perk points and bucks spent on your upgrade tree to suit the situation that you're currently in. I can see this being a major plus in some of the higher difficulties, as you'll definitely want to spec Jesse differently depending on which enemies you know you'll be facing. Did I mention that this game has an online co-op mode? Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to try it out myself as I got a copy way ahead of release. Woe is me, am I right? You'll be able to cooperatively obliterate hordes of vampires with one other player. The game also features a New Game Plus mode, allowing you to keep all of the weapons and perks and upgrades you had at the end of a playthrough and carry them on into another. There is one gripe though that I have with Evil West, and that is the fact that it doesn't feature a level select function. Often when you beat games, typically right at the very end, you'll have the option to select which mission that you want to replay, allowing you to dive into your favorite mission and play through your favorite combat encounters. Evil West doesn't feature this, and so if you want to play your favorite mission again, you'll have to replay the entire game and get back up to that point. And though whilst this isn't a gripe, I was actually surprised to see that they didn't have some form of horde or survival mode where Jesse takes on an endless amount of vampires. It would definitely suit this game's fast and frenetic combat, and perhaps it's something they may add later on as DLC. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Evil West. And if gothic horror mixed with weird, wild west and steampunk sounds like a perfect mix to you, then I definitely suggest you pick it up. And with that, we come to the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts on Evil West down in the comments below and whether or not you're going to be picking it up. If you enjoyed today's video, do be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on what comes next. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.